Hi, everyone, and welcome to Life Unpotted community series. We're really excited you're here, and I want to let you know that we want to hear from you. We want to continue this series, and we want to hear your questions. We want to hear your insights. We want to hear your current thought processes. We want to talk about them on the podcast. So if you have anything on your mind and you've been thinking about it, or this is calling you right now and you want to send us a note, email us at info@livelifeumpotted.com. Feel free to DM us or send us a voice note, whatever feels most aligned with what your style is. And we'd be very happy to have a community series around your question or whatever it is that's going on in your life. So, or your mind, right? We're here to elevate your voices. And I think hearing others who are questioning things is really helpful for not only you to get your voice out there, but also for our listeners. So we want to hear from you. Shoot us an email. Let us know what's on your mind. And that will allow us to continue doing the series.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I know we had one listener write in who's told us it took them 5 times to actually make the decision to write us in. If this is something you want to do, but maybe you feel a little uncomfortable doing because you don't know how to formulate your thoughts, use this as an opportunity to go through discomfort. Use this as a chance to kind of be like, I kind of want to do this. I want to write in the question, but what am I even going to say? No, you have a lot to say. There's clearly thoughts you have. And I think it's a really great chance to formulate your ideas, formulate your thoughts, formulate your philosophies, whatever it may be. I think it's easy to feel nervous for this kind of stuff, but we want to hear from you. You guys literally make this series. We couldn't have it without you. So reach out to us, get involved, and we'd love to have you part of the community series. So I'll let Daisy go ahead and read today's question, which I'm really excited to get into.
Yeah, so let's get into this question. I'll let you know that I woke up early this morning and I pieced apart this question and I studied it. I felt like I was back in school because there was a lot of points to it. So I'm really excited to share it with all of you and for us to flesh it out and Sophie and I to question each other on if we understand parts of it, because we do. It's always going deeper. So let's get into the question. Hi, Sophie and Daisy. I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking about forgiveness. I notice throughout the moments of the day that sometimes these little micro-judgments will pop up. I know that part of the conditioning of youth is in finding your place in the world, and you find things that you like and you dislike. And that's okay. But when I identify with those preferences as being quote unquote me, they cause me to get annoyed when I don't get what I want in conversation, environment, comfort, security, all down the line. There is a non-acceptance of the present, and instead of relaxing into whatever that moment is, I will double down and look for ways to feel justified in my perception, which obviously takes me further away from the experience of the present. The way forgiveness plays into that scenario is that if I can forgive myself for my conditioning as I work through how that appears in my life, I can understand and forgive others who may have quote unquote wronged me because they are also just doing the best they can. And sometimes that looks like treating people like shit, just as I had done and learned from others. Forgiveness and acceptance seem to go hand in hand, and this seems to be even more true as I continue in my journey of self-discovery. I would love to hear your experiences with this. I'm enjoying the additional episodes, and I appreciate you. Much love. This is a great question, and initially what comes to mind is really this idea of forgiveness and how it starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with the person you see in the mirror. That is where all of this begins. All of the change happens with you, yourself, and oftentimes your emotional state of forgiveness around these things. And I like how he talks about and how he phrases this conditioning that we all have had. We've all been conditioned through things maybe we didn't want to be conditioned through. So maybe we have judgments toward those things. So it's a lifelong journey to forgive those conditionings that continue to appear in our life in different ways. And I think the second part of this is once we're able to do that, we're able to really create that space for others. And even if they're going through it, maybe us creating the space for them is what is going to allow them to realize that they can create that space for themselves. And so this goes down the line, and it helps us break this idea of ourselves. It helps break this idea of the illusion of separation and division, and it helps bring us all together. And we know we are most powerful when we are one force. So I want to hear how that sits with you, Sophie, so we can continue to flesh it out.
It really resonated with me when he said that we are all just doing the best that we can. It's really easy to go through life with very high standards that we set for other people, and clearly that we're just setting for ourselves. And I feel like as you were just talking through that, it made me have the image of somebody who is later in life realizing all these preferences that they have about the world. I'll use myself as an example. I've really realized like the past 3 or 4 years, like how controlling I've been, how much I've really tried to control people and things in my life. How if things weren't perfect, that pissed me off. If somebody was wearing a item of clothing, I would comment on it. And I feel like the illustration in my head that like I kind of visualize as you're talking about that is like, say for me or somebody who's working through realizing like, why do I think these things, right? Because I think this journey is really us waking up to our subconscious mind and waking up to the way that we interact with the world. And that can be a really weird place because you're kind of just like, wait, why do I get so frustrated by this? Like, why am I judging all this? Why do I feel so triggered? And you almost like rewind like 20 years or whatever. Like for me, if rewind like 25 years to when I'm 5 years old or 10 years old. And you imagine that person growing up with a set of parents or one parent who is just another human being, right? And who is now instilling all of these ideas, beliefs, and preferences onto this malleable child. And then this child starts growing up and they start looking to that parent as, wow, I want to be like them. Like I definitely strove to be like my parent, like especially to be like my dad. And like that was a really big thing in my upbringing, like wanting to impress my parents, wanting to show off for them. And I think the combination of that, your upbringing plus your societal upbringing, going to school, we start to just really absorb all these ways of thinking. And I really like how, like you say and the listener says, basically, like we're all just doing the best we can. Because when we start waking up to how we've been living, it's this really weird experience because you're almost like, wait, who was that? Who have I been the past 25, 30, 40, 50 years? And that's where that level of forgiveness for yourself goes of, oh, I was just doing the best I can. I was just trying to fit in. I was just literally given these set of circumstances as I was born into this world, and I did the best that I could. So maybe, isn't that just what everyone else is doing? So I think just to get started, I think, yeah, like really when we start to understand why we view the world the way we do, why we have limited it ourselves, why we have hurt other people, and honestly, why we've been continuously hurting ourselves, we really start to see ourselves in other people. And I think ultimately forgiveness and acceptance, yes, they go 100% hand in hand, because the more we accept ourselves, the more we can forgive others. And ultimately that idea of division shatters. And you start realizing that we all are just figuring it out. And sometimes, like the listener says, that leads to hurting people. And I think it's an unfortunate reality, but waking up to acceptance can really replace any anger you have towards that person with so much love.
Well, I really think it's such a beautiful question because the core of the question, the answer of the core of the question, the main theme of the question is healing, self-love, forgiving yourself. That's the hardest step to take, is to direct that toward yourself, because there's two paths that you go down in this world. And so you did a really good job of painting a picture of what it means for us to all grow up with this conditioning, whether it's familial, societal, own internalized from everything. We all grow up with like this turtle shell of our conditionings. And I think we typically talk about this through the lens of healing, working through things. And I think this paints another picture of the same thing through different lingo, different verbiage. And that's important because different verbiage resonates more strongly with other people who maybe not are going to resonate with certain lingo or verbiage or whatever it may be. So I appreciate having this conversation be expanded through this question. So again, I think it's really a beautiful realization to say that it all starts with you, because in a way that gives you a level of control. It gives you, and whenever I say control in this podcast, I don't mean real control. I mean a level of accountability is really what I mean. You can start to take accountability for the anger that you are turning onto yourself, because ultimately, whatever you do and say and judge yourself for, that first and foremost will get projected onto everyone in your life, all the interactions that you have. And I think it's really easy to deny ourselves that nothing's wrong with us, that nothing happened to us. But so well put in this question was, well, everyone has a conditioning. And that conditioning plays out whether we're aware of it in our consciousness or if it's in our subconsciousness, that we are not aware of it. So everyone deserves to become aware of their conditioning, because only once you become aware of your conditioning can you start to forgive yourself for the judgments you may have to your conditioning. And to the listener's point in the question is, sometimes I find the conditionings I have not given myself forgiveness for come up as micro judgments toward other people who have that same conditioning. So I think if you're sitting here saying, well, I want to look at my conditioning, but I don't know how to do that, think about what bothers you and other people when you see them. And I think that's a good place to start, because who doesn't have bothersomes or annoyances from seeing things in other people? Because if it bothers you in someone else, the rule of thumb is that there's something within you that is causing that. So you have to be able to forgive yourself. And not until you forgive yourself can you really show love to everyone else who is feeling that. And I feel like I've simplified this question. I feel like I get this question. I think I was so intimidated by how big this question was, but I think at its core, it's realizing once we forgive ourselves, we're able to see that we are no different from anyone else, because once we're operating out of state of love for ourselves, we are going to be more than willing to operate out of a state of love for others, even those ones who are not being nice to us or who are quote unquote wronging us or not treating us properly, with the caveat of safety, right? Those people who maybe could be nicer to us. Think of someone who cuts you off when you're driving your car. Or think of someone who writes you a ticket when it's maybe not necessarily deserved. Or think of the situation where someone is snippy to you when you call them and they apologize, and you're able to further deeper connect once you're able to call out that conditioning. But it all starts with you. You have to be the one that's able to create that space. And I think that this question really fits in line with what we talk about, because it always is you that it comes back to, and giving yourself the love and the emotional space and not having the judgment for yourself.
This is really making me think of so I was bullied in, I guess, middle school or high school, combination of both. Kids were just mean, and I just remember there was a rumor about me and people were mean to me. And then guess what? 2 years later, I was going with my mom to the library to apologize to this girl who I had bullied online, and I had said really mean things too. And it's just making me think back at like at that point in time. Obviously, I had absolutely no awareness what was happening. It's like when we're in these younger years, like middle school and high school, it's funny looking back because it feels like during those times, life was happening. Like there was so much happening, and I vividly, so many of my memories, and honestly, so much I think of my societal conditioning is rooted in that, in the way I perceive myself during those years, and thinking people didn't like me and thinking people judged me. But I look back and I was like, of course I bullied, because I was bullied and I was hurt. And it's so interesting when you think about, like, I remember probably my mom taking me to the library, and it's like the instinctual response probably as a parent is, why did you do that? Why did you hurt? Why would you ever do that? Like, we perceive people and we look at their actions at face value and we go, why would you ever do that? What is wrong with you? And I think this is the way we view so many people in society. We have a very narrow-minded perception, and we almost assume the worst in everyone. We assume that everyone is intending to hurt people. And it really makes me think of the question of free will, right? Like, to what extent do any of us have free will? If we're all just running around like with our heads chopped off, with this massive and massive conditioning from the world we've been thrown into, especially when we never have been in an environment. Some people don't even have the environment to cultivate healing. It's not safe, right? Or they have been through so much shit. It's really hard to work through the cards that you were drawn in this life, to look at those and to realize that you've been freaking hurt. So going back to the bully example, like looking now from like knowing I was bullied at that age, and then seeing me grow up and then kind of become slightly controlling in college, and the way I interacted with people I dated, just kind of disregard, I think, for their emotions, or disregard for always like wanting people to be the best of the best. And I think that was me really projecting what I learned from my dad, and what I learned from like the idea of power makes you stronger and control is how you get power. And I think that like that really led to me hurting a lot of people. It really did. And I just never knew what I was doing. And I think it's only till recently that I've been on this journey of like healing these intense wounds that I have, where I can then look back to high school and the people who bullied me and think, oh, what were they going through? And it's almost like that gives you so much peace, because you realize, number one, it was never about you. It was never about you. And I think at these ages, we don't understand that, because it's so hard for us to see that everybody's hurting. So just to loop this back into the question, into what we're talking about, it's like, I think it's safe to say that everybody's in pain. Everybody's hurting. Does that mean that it's okay to then project that onto the world? No. We have the ability to become aware of our emotions. We have the ability to separate ourselves from our thoughts and emotions. And I think in forgiveness, there is a line that's drawn of recognizing that we can have forgiveness towards other people by realizing that they were just hurt too. We can free ourselves from the anger of feeling like we have to have retribution, or we have to wrong them back because we see ourselves in them. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't heal. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't become aware. I think it just means that reacting with anger is never the answer. Reacting with pain, as Eckhart Tolle always talks about, when we are triggered and we react in our pain body, we are then reacting to their pain body, and all you have is two pain bodies interacting. You never have two aware individuals, conscious individuals. So I think this is really a great question, because it just makes me really think about the importance of going on this journey, because it really just allows you to see yourself and everybody and realize that yes, we are all just doing the best that we can.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say, right? Everyone deserves to have the space to decondition all of their learnings and to learn to forgive and love themselves. And the reality that you pointed out is there are millions of people who are actively going through things where they don't even have the space to comprehend that they can forgive themselves. And that's on a multitude of levels, right? So I think, one, recognizing that if you are someone who is questioning your conditioning and starting to forgive yourself, you're very lucky. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And then there is an obligation to continue to do that so that you can be that person who does create space for others and help them see that they can forgive themselves, they can question their conditioning, that they're allowed to do so. And maybe you can be that safe space that allows someone to recognize they can do that. And as I've gone more on this journey of questioning conditioning, I've really left this idea of our point of purpose and success is career driven. It's financial driven. I've started to see those things more or less as empty, because without this strong core of realizing we all deserve this space, like that is what feels purpose driven, is to be able to cultivate this space wherever you go, for whoever you're with, for them to take it or leave it, but for them to be given the option to be experiencing this kind of energy and space. And I think that it's a beautiful thing. And I do think that it takes years to get to this point sometimes. And not everyone is equal in this journey. Not everyone is equal in the pain and the conditioning. And the story, Sophie, you shared of someone bullying you and you passing that down the line makes me think of the story of when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I had a neighbor girl over who we were playing together, and she kicked over my light bright. Sophie's smiling because she knows the story because it's so awful. But she like kicked them over, not intentionally, like she just kicked them over. And I freaked out and called her an idiot, a moron. How could you do that? I was screaming at her like face red. And I reflect on that. And at 6 years old, it's like, why would I treat another child that way? And it's like, well, clearly I had experienced that level of anger somewhere. So it's always very easy to pass that on. And it's really, I think, easier to see in kids. Maybe not your own kids because there's so much there, but prospectively from watching other children. Because it's so easy to look at kids as someone who is like pure and innocent, but they're also very moldable. Their brains are so easily molded based off what they're seeing, more so than any time in our life. So I think looking back to our childhood that's where our conditioning begins. So becoming aware of what we're exposed to as kids and really following the line down to that, because ultimately things have an entry point, and oftentimes it's when we're young, because those are times that we are so moldable and vulnerable and susceptible to taking on conditionings that we didn't really consent to having. And that's just the way it goes with life.
It's making me think about in the surrender experiment where Michael Singer goes to the correctional facility and he has such a profound experience there with these people who are in jail, and they have such an eagerness to wake up. Like, it's so beautiful. I remember tearing up as I read that chapter because it just showed that these people who have found their way to prison, right? They have found their way to jail, have so much pain in them. And look, I think it's a really tough line to draw, because this is the classic question of then if somebody goes and kills somebody, you can't excuse that. That's horrific. You can't excuse that. But it's also asking the question of what happened to them? Who hurt them? What are they going through? And I see this in my own upbringing, like with siblings and just experiences, and just the way that whenever something happened, like if a sibling did something, my parents, I think, would always view it with like, what's wrong with them? Like, we have to fix them. We have to punish. Think about when you get a timeout as a kid. Let's give you a timeout. Like, I just think it's like, this question is so beautiful because it really shows us how we as a society and the way we interact, number one, with our kids, with our family, with our friends, with our coworkers, with anyone and everyone, with the police officer who gives you a ticket, with a guy who bumps into you on the street, is to stop thinking about yourself and to maybe think about, what is this person going through? I want to ask the question of like we keep saying the word forgiveness. And I think forgiveness, it's easy to understand when we're saying it, okay, like your friend lied to you and was really, really awful to you and it led to you being really, really hurt. You have to forgive them. But what does it mean to forgive ourselves in not the sense of we've hurt people, but rather, I guess, the pain that we've subconsciously been causing to ourselves? And like the listener poses, that has led to us living a life that's everywhere but in the moment.
So before I answer that, I wanted to just take it back to the correctional facility example you gave and saying that if someone's able to kill someone or if someone does something horrible to someone else, there's two ends of the pendulum. What happened to them to cause them to do such a thing? What was the number of things that happened to them? What was the singular thing that happened to them that caused that? So my question is, if it all starts with that person, if something was done to them that caused them to be so unstable, to do a horrible act that would cause them to go to jail, if it all starts with them, don't they then have the right to heal themselves? Maybe that doesn't mean a life of freedom outside of jail, but maybe that means spiritual freedom within themselves to look at their conditionings, to question them, and to heal from all the things that was done wrong to them. And to maybe at a point where it's too late, it's never too late, but to take accountability. I think everyone has the right to take accountability for where they're at, for their emotions, for what they're feeling, because on the other side of that is healing and forgiveness. So I just wanted to say that. Now, to answer your question around this idea of forgiveness, could you clarify what the exact question is?
It's a question of like, what does it mean to forgive ourselves on this self-discovery journey where we're waking up and we're like, I've had a lot of moments of feeling like, I can't believe I've been living this way. Like, and I guess I never thought of forgiving myself. I thought of maybe being like giving myself love. Like I've put my hand on my heart a lot of times and just really feeling the pain I felt. But yeah, I was just curious to hear because I haven't really thought of the word forgiveness for my personal self. So I'm just curious to hear, like, if you think that applies to the journey of waking up. I guess we maybe view it more holistically as a whole in, like, everything that you're saying is like a ping pong. It works conjunctively together.
So isn't the opposite of forgiveness a grievance? And a grievance is like a grudge, right? Or the opposite of forgiveness is a grudge. And I don't have the exact definition, but to harbor feelings of a grudge, to harbor a grudge means to hold and carry resentment and anger. Those are the two things that come top to mind. So if you're harboring a grudge toward yourself, which I don't think oftentimes we think about it like that, but I think it's easier to break it down and say if we're harboring resentment towards ourselves, if we're harboring anger towards ourselves, then we can't be holding ourselves in forgiveness. So I do think this applies to me. I think I've never thought about it through this lens, but I kind of think it's the same feeling of saying I'm going to give myself the love that I didn't get at a place and time when I was hurt, when I was not given what I needed. I think forgiveness is the same feeling there of I forgive myself for these conditionings that taught me I needed to be a certain way. So maybe the forgiveness level, I think it's specifically around the conditionings. And I think the conditionings are what cause us the pain. But I think it's like looking at those conditionings, giving love to those conditionings. And then that allows us to give forgiveness to those conditionings. So I think it's different lingo. It's something I haven't thought about. But I think it is that same feeling of openness and love and just kind of surrendering. And a new word I'm thinking about, or a new phrase of like to better describe what it's like to someone who hasn't surrendered, is to let control. Say you start to cry and you just let control. Like you let it go. You let go of all control and you just surrender to what you're feeling. And I don't necessarily mean throwing shit and breaking windows if that's what you feel. I mean, it's like surrendering and letting go of controlling yourself from feeling that deep pain. And I feel like I've experienced this. It was after we took mushrooms, or we took a microdose with our friend Erica, who was visiting. And it was a few days after, and we were all kind of going through different things. And I remember sitting in the couch and things that have triggered me, noises, all that kind of stuff. I remember just sitting with it, and actively I said to myself in my head, I feel like I'm dying. That's how painful this all feels to me right now. But I wasn't trying to control the pain that was inside of me. I was accepting it and surrendering to it. So in that case, I wasn't judging it. I wasn't resenting that these things had happened that caused me to feel this way about such little things. I wasn't thinking. The mind actually wasn't involved at all. And I think that's the interesting point here. Like there's all different types of different lingo, but all of the lingo is something that's done in the mind. It's a way to point us to the feeling states that we're eventually going to get to, and we're all going to have the same experience with this kind of healing. We might describe it differently, but again, the lingo, the words, it's the logical, linear thinking. It's just a tool to get us to this feeling of acceptance, which with forgiveness comes acceptance, but it's more of a feeling.
Yeah, I like how you said it. It is just a feeling state. And I also want to bring up an example of, think about people you know, or you've been in experiences in public situations where you see somebody and like you comment on them. You're like, oh, why is that person wearing that? Or why is that person being so loud? Or why is that person, oh, I can't believe they would do that. Like these extreme judgment, like the listener is saying, like these extreme preferences we have towards other people of micro judgment, of like, even if you don't say it out loud, you're kind of like, you're rubbed the wrong way by somebody. I really noticed like in my journey of showing myself so much love, and like you're saying, it was making me think like about everything we're talking about right now. It just boils down to a state of love. There's no word. It's not about lingo. It's not about what definition means what. It's about interacting with the world with an open, loving presence. And the more that I've done that over the past years, specifically the past 2 years, past year, I just don't have room anymore to judge anyone, really. And I used to see those micro judgments come up, and this is really interesting realization. So on this journey of like becoming aware of all the judgments I had towards other people and all those angers, all that anger, I feel like for the first year, it was like becoming aware of those thoughts of like, I'm having a thought of that person like is just weird, or that person is just, I don't know, just a thought that about somebody who I'm seeing in the public setting. And the more I became aware of that, the less I stopped feeding that. So the less I stopped having those thoughts. And it's like, what was I left with? I was left with like this like weird feeling in my body, I guess, of like anger or pain that would arise when I would be in those situations that would normally lead to thoughts like, ugh, what a loser. Or, oh, that guy's probably an idiot. Like, what does he know? So I think it really shows that the journey of peeling back the layers, when you ultimately like thoughts are reactive thoughts, labeling somebody as a loser is just another level up above the pain. And it's almost like you no longer have those thoughts, or they aren't as prevalent anymore, because what you're left with is just the pain. So I'm not sure if that made sense, but what I'm trying to communicate is that like the more I've now showed myself so much love, the more I've healed, I don't have that same level of judgment towards people anymore. I really don't. I'm able to view basically and interact with everyone with this very open sense of love and openness and acceptance. And that's because I faced that pain, and it was that pain that was just being coded for those judgments when I interacted with people. So acceptance is 100% forgiveness. And I think those words, again, it's just words. What it really means is just like, are you in anger or are you in love?
I think it's a well put, you're in anger or you are in love. And I would second that. I feel I used to be so closed off for myself. I would handle all of the pain that the conditionings and so on caused me, the judgments that were currently happening of myself. So I would hide myself away and I would hide myself from others. And through this journey of opening myself up, of accepting, of working through these things, I've seen life in such a different way, of the sheer connection we have with others. It's so beautiful, and it's opened me up to connect with others, to allow myself to be seen by others. And I think that that is where a lot of our purpose lies in this life, or a lot of our drive, our enjoyment of what just is meant to be. There's so much that we get from each other, especially when we're able to cultivate this non-judgmental, loving state within ourselves, because that follows us wherever we go, and that follows us into any room we're with other people, and that's a contagious thing. So it's truly, I feel honored to be written in questions like this that are contagious with the way they make you feel from talking about them. And I feel very lucky to get to answer these kinds of questions and to have others put thought into these kinds of questions and send them to us, because it's such a beautiful way to spend time. We're not directly talking to this listener, but in a way we are directly talking with this listener, because it feels like this note is so beautiful. It feels like a love note. It feels like what is at the core of our human connections with each other. It's a beautiful dialogue to have. So I just feel really grateful for this listener writing in such an in-depth question. I'll speak for myself. I loved this episode. It was really incredible to get to digress on something that we didn't think of. It came from someone else. So it allowed us to have different perspectives and to maybe speak in a different way. So to the listener, thank you for taking the time to write this in. And we would love to hear more from you. We love these kinds of questions, and it's just an honor to get to do this.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I also, like, just going back to the question, if someone has wronged you, like if someone has hurt you, you can still connect. You can still let love permeate between the ideas you have about this person or the anger you have about this person. Like, not to sound so cliche, but like love really does win. Because when you let go of the words, you let go of the ideas, you let go of the idea that someone can be a bad person and that person's a bad person because they did all these things. When you just see yourself in them, you realize they're just a person too, man. Like, that's all we are. And we all deserve love. We all deserve connection. We all deserve to be humanized. That no matter where you're from, no matter your skin color, no matter what you look like, no matter what you have done, we all deserve a chance to heal and to spiritually find peace within ourselves. So maybe a great way to end this episode is if there is somebody in your life who you have felt like they've wronged you, how can you try to see where they're coming from and wonder, what are their conditionings? What have they gone through to lead them to feel so hurt that they had the capacity to hurt you? But thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much to the listener. I think, just like Daisy said, like, it's beautiful to have the ability to talk through these thoughtful questions. And it is like a little note we receive and we get to work through them. It's just us all interacting as one. It's just us spreading our love. And it just shows that, like, if there's anything I've learned from this podcast, especially this series, that you can live in a different country. You can live in, I don't even know, a different planet. Like, we all go through the same shit. It may be defined differently. It may look differently. But when you peel the pieces back, you're left with love or you're left with anger. So thank you so much to the listener. Thank you so much to the community for listening. Please, please, please write us in. Whatever is on your mind, we would love to work through it. We love to share your thoughts with our community, to spread that with the world. Because ultimately, the beauty of these messages, they can be heard for free globally. This is free awareness. This is global awareness. This is allowing people to wake up, to heal. So the ripples are being felt, the changes are being made, and we couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you so much for listening. We will speak to you guys on Tuesday. And until then, we hope you all have a nice weekend.